we don't want your whole loaf. We just want a slice, just a slice or two.
We're the Armed Attorneys. Today we're talking about the legal framework proposed by several U.S. senators over the weekend that seems to indicate that gun control is on the horizon. But before we begin, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button. And we're going to get into what the legal framework looks like. But before we start that, there are quite a few Republicans that have, allegedly signed on to this, Edwin. And what does that look like?
It has been well known that any gun control measure will die in the Senate unless there are 10 Republican senators which support it. And so that came out this weekend that the following 10 Republican senators are already on board with a plan that has been proposed by Senator John Cornyn. Those 10 senators are Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Mitt Romney of Utah, Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, John Cornyn of Texas, Susan Collins of Maine, Thom Tillis of North Carolina, Richard Burr of North Carolina, so you got both North Carolina senators, Roy Blount of Missouri, Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, and Rob Portman of Ohio.
And what we see here is we don't have a law that we can break down section by section and give you, some digestible material that you can work on. We just have this kind of loose legal framework that they're proposing. So we're going to have to draw some inferences here and make some, logical deductions based on the information that they're providing. But they fall into two big categories. One is gun control measures. The other is money that they think would, resolve some of the issues that we've seen lately. Now, when it comes to the gun control, there are really two or maybe three big aspects to this. The first one is a waiting period for the purchase of long guns for those people ages 18, 19, and 20. And what do we see with that, Edwin?
Well, this is the area where this is definitely evidence of compromise, because the anti-gun folks, they have been pushing really hard to raise the level the age to purchase a long gun to 21, which of course is a dramatic shift in the law, which is that 18-year-olds have been able to purchase long guns since the beginning of the Republic. So this is definitely in the nature of compromise. And so instead of permanently disqualifying 18, 19, 20-year-olds from buying long guns, what it would say is that there will be a waiting period for anybody who falls into these ages, and that juvenile records will now be reviewable, because of course 18, 19, 20-year-olds generally, there's very little time for them to have accumulated a criminal record unless it was juvenile. And so these juvenile records will be available for those individuals in that age range. But it's not hard to believe that eventually won't be expanded to everybody.
Yep. The next gun control measure that came out of this, or what they're proposing out of this legal framework, is they say criminalization of straw man purchases now, and penalties for straw man purchases. Now, as you know, if you're a law-abiding gun owner, straw man purchases already illegal. You cannot go into the gun store with the intent to purchase a firearm for another person with their money. You could do it for a bona fide gift, for example. But if you're going in buying a gun on behalf of another person, already a crime. So when they talk about double criminalizing something that's already a crime, it makes me think that they're going to be expanding third-party purchase requirements. And we kind of saw this, and this is where I think this is going, out of H.R. 7910 that was just passed in the House of Representatives, expanding the prohibition on third-party purchases and limiting it to only immediate family members, as opposed to, buying a gift for another person outside of that group. So this one we have to speculate a little bit. They've only proposed the framework, but when they talk about criminalizing something that's already a crime, it means that they're probably expanding it. That brings us to the next one, which is clarification on what a licensed firearms dealer is. And this one we have to speculate again, Edwin, but what do you expect this means?
Well, keep in mind that it is a crime to be an unlicensed firearm dealer. So if you're a private individual who's out there that is buying and selling guns for the purposes of either running a business or for the purposes of making a profit, you are already committing a federal crime under the law. However, where the law has been somewhat ambiguous is that there's no specific number. You don't have to do a specific amount or quantity. And so what we may be looking at here is them setting a number or defining it so that what I certainly hope is an elimination of private sales entirely.
And I don't really know why this would necessarily be necessary. We have seen a humongous uptick in the number of ATF investigations with firearms traces, and just overall harassment of law-abiding people who, maybe they purchase a number of guns in a short period of time, or maybe they offloaded their collection. There's legitimate reasons they're not engaging in the business of firearms, but we see the ATF, really kind of harassing people and intimidating people in this area. And so I don't know that this is necessary, but that's kind of what I see coming.
Yeah, the ATF has not been shy of pursuing these unlicensed gun dealers, and it has been the law. It has always been the law that people have been allowed to buy and sell guns as long as it's done for the enhancement or the depletion of their personal collection.
Yep.
And so it'll be very interesting to see if they are going to use this, this crackdown on unlicensed dealer as a subterfuge to ultimately prohibit private sales, which is what anytime an anti-gun person uses the term universal background check, that's what they're ultimately after, is a firearms registry and the prohibition against private individuals selling or transferring firearms to another private individual who resides in their same state.
And that brings us to the next piece of gun control to come out of this proposed legal framework, and that relates to closing what they call the boyfriend loophole. Sometimes you hear it referred to as the Charleston loophole. And this is, folks who would not qualify as being disqualified to purchase and possess firearms and ammunition under 18 U.S.C. 922, because we have this general prohibition on folks who've been convicted of misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence. Now, as part of that prohibition, that does not include people who've been in a dating relationship. Now, we see a whole heck of a lot of states adopt that measure already, saying, hey, if you're engaged in dating violence, then we're going to treat you differently than other folks. But this would be a federal codification of and expansion of the list of prohibited people. Now, we can see the argument of why we would want to limit the possession of firearms by people who've been involved in these kind of intimate relationships. But here's where it gets a little bit squirrely. When are you in a dating relationship, Edwin?
Well, that's going to be very difficult to determine. There are some states like Texas who have already criminalized or they've enhanced assaults that take place in the framework of this dating relationship. But if the federal government believes that they're going to be able to retroactively go back and figure out whether or not an assault that occurred in 1990 involved two people who were in a dating relationship, I think that's a fool's errand. I don't know how they'll be able to do that.
Yeah, one winky emoji in a text message, that's probably fine. 3, maybe you're in a dating. No, I don't know how they're going to figure out what that looks like, but obviously that's going to be a huge expansion of the list of prohibited people that they're proposing out of this framework. Now, the last piece of gun control that I'd say that's really big out of the proposed framework is red flag orders. What do we see with that, Edwin?
Well, with regard to the red flag orders, this is where truly the devil will be in the details, because it's going to be interesting to see what path they take. Are they going to try to create some sort of federal red flag protective order, which I think is going to be unduly burdensome on the federal judiciary? Or are they going to force states to adopt their own red flag laws, much like they did with states whenever they raised the drinking age from 18 to 21, by putting financial incentives and financial disincentives to the states to force them to change their laws.
Yeah, and we see that kind of carrot stick methodology with a lot of different things. When the federal government can't do something legitimately, they wave a carrot in front of the state's face saying, hey, we're not allowed to do this legitimately, but we're going to give you a whole bunch of money for it, which I think is, I think that's a little dubious at best, but that's what we see with red flag. Again, legal framework, don't have a law to analyze in front of us, but those are the big gun control measures that we see out of it. Now, there are a few other things related to funding. They want to invest in security for schools. They want to invest in mental health services. They want to fund telehealth. So they have some other provisions mostly related to money. But we wanted to bring those big gun control issues to the forefront to make sure this isn't necessarily a compromise. I mean, we covered a whole bunch of things. It doesn't seem like law-abiding gun owners are getting much out of this deal.
Fortunately, it appears that this is targeted to specific groups of individuals and is not really won't have a huge impact on the lawful gun owner. Certainly not like some of these plans about banning assault weapons. That obviously impacts the lawful gun owner. Magazine capacities obviously affects the lawful gun owner. just generic blanket waiting periods affect the lawful gun owner. So this does appear, and this is perhaps the nature of the compromise, to be narrowly tailored to individuals who fit into specific circumstances. So, I mean, I guess that's kind of a win. However, if you pay attention to the anti-gun folks' rhetoric, they do not intend to stop here. One of them said on TV, this is a good first step, which of course begs the question, well, what does he envision as second or third steps?
Right.
And in fact, Matthew McConaughey said in his interview on Fox, we don't want your whole loaf. We just want a slice, just a slice or two. Well, they've been taking slices since 1934. So how many more slices does the lawful gun owner have to give up?
But we know this isn't a fun topic to discuss, but we appreciate y'all hanging out with us. If you enjoyed the discussion, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video. And always question and comment below. And until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.